She kept her eyes down as chaos erupted around her. The terrorists stormed the subway car, guns raised, passengers screaming. They saw what everyone always saw, a quiet woman they could ignore, just another frightened face in the crowd. This was their first mistake. They assumed her stillness was fear. They assumed her silence was weakness. They would soon discover what happens when you underestimate the person sitting quietly in the corner. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one no one notices. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? Let us know in the comments below. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing for more stories that explore the hidden strengths we all carry within us. The Q train shuddered through the tunnel, its fluorescent lights flickering in rhythm with the clacking rails. Rush hour in New York City created a microcosm of humanity packed shoulder to shoulder, each person lost in their own world while physically sharing space with strangers. Riven Parrish boarded at Canal Street Station, her movements deliberate but unremarkable. Nothing about her invited a second glance. Her charcoal gray coat hung over a navy blouse paired with dark slacks and sensible shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, face bare of makeup. The worn messenger bag slung across her body contained nothing suspicious. An e-reader, a reusable water bottle, a small umbrella, a protein bar. She chose a seat near the door, one that offered clear sight lines to both ends of the car. As the doors closed and the train lurched forward, she opened her e-reader, but her eyes flicked briefly to the security cameras mounted in the corners of the car. A businessman in an expensive suit stumbled as the train accelerated, spilling his coffee. Most splashed on the floor, but some landed on Riven's shoe. "Sorry," he muttered, not making eye contact, already back on his phone. Riven simply nodded, using a tissue to dab at the spill. Her movements were efficient, almost mechanical. Two teenagers stood nearby, loudly discussing a video game. "Dude, the headshot was insane. Blood everywhere." "Yeah, but the knife kill was better. The way he just came up behind that guy?" Riven shifted slightly away, her posture tightening imperceptibly. At the next stop, a young mother struggled to maneuver a stroller through the crowded car. Without fanfare, Riven stood and created space, helping guide the wheels over the gap. The mother smiled gratefully. Riven nodded once and immediately returned to her corner seat. On the digital screens mounted throughout the car, news headlines scrolled. Transit Authority announces new security measures, and anti-terrorism drills scheduled this month. Riven's eyes lingered on these longer than necessary. The businessman who had spilled his coffee earlier now spoke loudly into his phone. "Look, I do not care what the market is doing. Make the trade." He glanced at Riven and lowered his voice. "These people have no idea what is coming." When someone dropped a heavy bag with a loud thud, Riven's hand tensed momentarily, a flash of something crossing her features before disappearing. As the train rattled on, she cataloged each passenger with quick, practiced glances disguised as casual observation. The construction worker with dirt-stained boots, the nurse still in scrubs, the three businessmen huddled together, the security guard heading home after his shift. For just a moment, unbidden, a memory surfaced. Darkness broken by green-tinged night vision, whispered commands in her ear, the weight of tactical gear against her body. She pushed it away, focusing again on her e-reader. The train suddenly jerked and slowed. Lights flickered, dimmed, then stabilized at half brightness. The recorded announcement system crackled. "We are experiencing a temporary delay. Please remain seated." Annoyed sighs rippled through the car, followed by the predictable chorus of complaints and the glow of phone screens as passengers messaged about being late. But Riven did not reach for her phone. Instead, she closed her e-reader and sat perfectly still, only her eyes moving as the train came to a complete stop between stations. Something had changed in her posture, an alertness that had not been there before. No one noticed the subtle shift, how her breathing had slowed, how her hands now rested ready at her sides rather than holding her book. No one noticed because no one was looking at the quiet woman in the corner. The train sat motionless for 3 minutes before the maintenance workers appeared at both ends of the car. 5 men in MTA uniforms moved with practiced coordination. In less than 10 seconds, the situation transformed. Maintenance workers became armed assailants. Pistols appeared from toolboxes. One produced a compact submachine gun. Another secured the connecting doors to adjacent cars. The leader, tall, with a burn scar running from his left eye to his jaw, fired twice into the ceiling. Screams erupted as debris rained down. "Everyone stay exactly where you are," his voice carried command. "This train is now under our control." Cooperation means survival. Panic spread like wildfire. A woman clutched her child to her chest, sobbing. An elderly man gripped his chest, gasping for breath. The businessman who had been so important moments ago now cowered behind his briefcase. Phones. All of them. Now. The second terrorist moved through the car with a bag. Any heroics, any calls, any attempts to alert authorities, and people start dying. A middle-aged businessman in an expensive suit stood up shakily. "Look, I am sure we can work something out. I have connections." The butt of a rifle caught him across the temple. He crumpled to the floor as his wife screamed. "Anyone else want to negotiate?" The leader surveyed the car. A teenager attempted to activate his phone's live stream feature. The terrorist nearest him noticed, grabbed the device, and smashed it against a pole. "Next time, it is not your phone that breaks," he hissed. Throughout the chaos, Riven remained motionless. While others dissolved into terror around her, she appeared almost catatonic. Yet her eyes missed nothing. 5 hostiles, 3 with handguns, 1 submachine gun, 1 with what appeared to be a detonator. The leader, clearly military trained. The youngest terrorist, nervous, trigger finger too tight. The leader tapped his earpiece. Lazarus confirming car 3 secure, proceeding as planned. He addressed the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, your government has 75 minutes to release our brothers from Florence ADX. Every 15 minutes they delay, one of you dies on live stream." 2 terrorists began moving through the car, cataloging passengers by perceived value. You, and you, move to that end," one ordered, pointing at a judge he recognized, the businessman in the expensive suit, and a woman wearing State Department credentials. As they processed passengers, 1 terrorist passed directly in front of Riven. Her breathing shifted imperceptibly. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. The measured rhythm of combat preparation. A woman next to Riven whispered desperately, "Please, do you have a phone they missed?" "My daughter." Riven responded with a subtle hand gesture, fingers splayed then closed to a fist, the universal military signal for wait. The woman looked confused but fell silent. When a terrorist checked Riven for devices, he barely glanced at her. His cursory pat-down missed the scar on her wrist, a small, precise mark where a military tracking implant would have been removed. The leader, Lazarus, walked slowly through the car, assessing his hostages. His gaze swept over Riven, paused momentarily as something registered, then moved on. Just another frightened woman, frozen in fear. A college student began hyperventilating, her panic attack escalating as a terrorist approached. "Shut her up," Lazarus ordered. The terrorist raised his weapon to strike her. Riven's eyes changed. The passive glaze vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. She had been watching, waiting, evaluating. Now, she had made a decision. Lazarus checked his watch. 15 minutes gone. Time for our first demonstration. He scanned the terrified faces and pointed to a man holding his young daughter. "You, stand up." The man clutched his child tighter. "Please, no. I have a family. That is why it is you." Lazarus nodded to one of his men. "Separate them." As the terrorist reached for the child, something shifted in the atmosphere of the car. A subtle change in pressure, like the moment before lightning strikes. Lazarus raised his hand, signaling to the terrorist approaching the father. "Make it clean. We are broadcasting." The terrorist raised his weapon, taking aim at the man's head while another pulled the screaming child away. What happened next occurred so quickly that many witnesses would later disagree about the sequence of events. Riven moved. One moment she was seated, appearing frozen like everyone else. The next, she was in motion, not the panicked scramble of a civilian, but the precise economy of someone for whom violence was a science. She closed the distance to the nearest terrorist in 2 steps. Her right hand clamped down on his wrist, redirecting his weapon while her left hand delivered a precise strike to his trachea. As he gasped for air, she disarmed him with a technique taught only in specialized military programs. A joint manipulation that left him no choice but to release the weapon or suffer a shattered wrist. She chose the wrist. Before the first terrorist hit the ground, Riven had already pivoted. The compact weight of the pistol now in her hand became an extension of her arm. "Down," she commanded to the passengers, her voice completely transformed, authoritative, clear, carrying easily over the chaos. The second terrorist turned toward the commotion, but Riven had already calculated his response time. She fired once, a precision shot to his shoulder that spun him away from the hostages he had been guarding. Before he could recover, she was on him, a knee driven into his solar plexus, followed by an elbow strike that rendered him unconscious. The third and fourth terrorists converged from opposite ends of the car. Riven used the confined space to her advantage. She vaulted over a row of seats, using a handhold to swing her body in a controlled arc that placed her behind one assailant. His attempt to turn was too slow. A pressure point strike to his neck dropped him immediately. The fourth terrorist managed to fire, but Riven had already anticipated his angle. She had positioned a metal trash can between them, which caught the bullet. The ricochet created enough distraction for her to close distance. This takedown was brutal, a sweeping leg strike followed by a precision blow to the base of the skull. Throughout it all, her face remained utterly calm. No fear, no rage, no hesitation. This was not adrenaline-fueled improvisation, but the application of extensively drilled combat protocols. Lazarus, realizing what was happening, turned his weapon toward the child, seeking leverage. "Stop, or..." He never finished the sentence. Riven had calculated this move too. A compact object, her metal water bottle, was already airborne, striking his weapon hand with enough force to disrupt his aim. His shot went wide as Riven closed the final distance. Their engagement was different, a recognition passing between them as trained operatives. Lazarus attempted a counteroffensive, his movements revealing formal military training. For 3 seconds, they exchanged strikes at a speed the civilian eye could barely follow. Then Riven found the opening she had been creating, breaking through his guard with a technique that originated in a classified close-quarters combat program. As she locked him in a submission hold, recognition dawned in his eyes. "Winterbloom," he whispered, genuine fear replacing confidence. Riven's expression did not change as she completed the hold, rendering him unconscious. The final terrorist, seeing his team neutralized in less than 20 seconds, dropped his weapon and raised his hands. "Please," he begged. "I was just..." Riven incapacitated him with the same mechanical efficiency she had shown the others. The emergency lights suddenly powered back to full strength, illuminating the aftermath. 5 armed terrorists, neutralized by a woman no one had noticed until moments ago. Passengers stared in stunned disbelief as Riven methodically secured weapons, checked pulses, and zip-tied the unconscious men using their own restraints. Her movements were practiced, automatic, the muscle memory of someone who had performed these actions countless times before. She retrieved a phone from Lazarus's pocket, quickly bypassing its security with practiced ease. The screen displayed what appeared to be a coordinated attack plan, multiple teams, synchronized targets across the transit system, scheduled executions for live streaming. "Listen carefully," she addressed the passengers, her voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command. "Emergency response will be here in approximately 3 minutes. When they arrive, tell them the southeastern tunnel entrance has been rigged. Tell them pattern Sigma. They will understand." She turned to leave through the emergency exit she had already calculated as her best escape route. "Wait," called the businessman whose coffee had spilled on her earlier. "Who are you?" Riven paused, something almost like humor flickering across her features. "Just another commuter," she said, and disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel. The platform at 14th Street Station had transformed into a tactical command center. SWAT teams, bomb units, and federal agents swarmed the area, processing hostages and securing the train. "Run it by me again," demanded Agent Alara Thorne, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back severely from her face. At 45, she carried herself with the hard-earned authority of someone who had seen the worst humanity had to offer and was rarely surprised anymore. Today was an exception. The SWAT commander replayed the security footage. "Train stops between stations. Terrorists take control. Then this." He pointed to the grainy figure of Riven. "She takes down 5 armed hostiles in 17 seconds, professionals, then vanishes before we arrive." Thorne leaned closer to the screen. "Replay the engagement with the leader." As the footage played, her eyes narrowed. "Freeze it. Enhance that sequence." The screen zoomed in on Riven's takedown of Lazarus. That technique is not taught in any conventional program, Thorne murmured. That is Kestrel protocol, classified. She straightened, decision made. Run her prints against restricted databases. Authorization code Thorne Alpha 79. A junior agent approached cautiously. Ma'am, we have identified the leader, Lazarus Martel, former Delta, dishonorably discharged in 2019, went mercenary. Interesting company he is keeping, Thorne mused. What did the hostages report? They said she told them to relay pattern Sigma, and something about the southeastern tunnel entrance. Thorne's expression changed. Clear the station. Now. 20 minutes later, bomb technicians confirmed what Thorne had already suspected. The southeastern service tunnel contained enough explosives to collapse the entire station. She knew, Thorne said, watching the bomb squad work. But how? Her phone buzzed with a priority alert. The fingerprint search had triggered a national security protocol. Not a match, but a deliberate no match that only happened when prints had been scrubbed from all databases by the highest authorities. Get me SCG on the line, she ordered, referring to the Special Capabilities Group, a shadow organization even within the intelligence community. Meanwhile, 12 blocks away, Riven moved through Midtown with practiced invisibility. She avoided cameras with subtle route adjustments, kept her head at precisely the angle needed to defeat facial recognition. She entered a convenience store, purchased a burner phone with cash, then continued to Bryant Park. At a predetermined dead drop, a hollowed-out brick in a rarely used maintenance area, she retrieved a waterproof package containing cash, credentials, and a key. She made a single call from the burner phone. When it connected, she spoke just 7 words. I have been compromised. Winterbloom protocol activated. Without waiting for a response, she destroyed the phone, dropping pieces in different trash cans as she walked. Across the city, media outlets had already begun running with the story. Civilian hero vanishes after subway takedown. Mystery woman thwarts. Terrorist plot. Who is the subway savior? Social media exploded with theories. She is clearly ex-military. Witness says she moved like something from a movie. Government definitely knows who she is. As these speculations spread, Agent Thorne received a classified brief. Her expression darkened as she read. Lock down the investigation, she ordered her team. Everything just went code black. 350 miles west of New York City, the Maple Creek train station served a rural community with a population of just under 5,000. Its single platform rarely saw more than a dozen passengers at once. A woman waited alone on the westbound platform. Her hair, now shoulder-length and auburn instead of dark brown, was partially covered by a wide-brimmed hat. Designer sunglasses concealed much of her face. Her clothes, premium hiking attire from REI, suggested an outdoor enthusiast rather than a city dweller. Nothing in her appearance connected her to Riven Parish or the woman from the subway. The station's ancient television displayed a news report about the thwarted attack. Footage showed rescued passengers being interviewed. She came out of nowhere, a tearful mother explained, clutching her child. 1 minute she was just sitting there, quiet as can be. The next. The woman shook her head in disbelief. It was like watching someone flip a switch, added a businessman. Suddenly she was not just a person. She was a force. The newscaster continued. Authorities remain tight-lipped about the identity of the woman social media has dubbed the Quiet Defender. Officials would neither confirm nor deny if she has connections to law enforcement or military organizations. A child on the platform dropped a plush dinosaur toy that skidded toward the woman. She picked it up, her movements fluid and gentle, and returned it with a small smile. The same hands that had neutralized armed terrorists less than 12 hours earlier now carefully straightened the dinosaur's fabric spikes before handing it back. As the train approached, she checked her new phone, a different model than she had carried yesterday. A message appeared. Alert. Winterbloom assets being hunted. Corell eliminated in Berlin. Vega in Santiago. Archer in Dubai. Mercer in Toronto. 4 confirmed. You are the last. She deleted the message, performed a security wipe on the device, then boarded the train, selecting a seat that offered clear sightlines of both entrances to the car. As the train pulled away from the station, the security cameras mounted above the platform pivoted slightly, tracking her departure. She noticed a subtle shift in her posture indicated awareness, but she did not react further. On the platform, A black SUV pulled up just as the train disappeared around a bend. Agent Alara Thorne emerged, scanning the now empty station with visible frustration. "She was here," a technician confirmed, showing Thorne a tablet. Facial recognition caught a 62% match despite substantial appearance changes. Thorne looked at the blurry surveillance image, then at the departing train. "Do we pursue?" her assistant asked. Thorne considered for a moment, then handed back the tablet. "Dispatch teams to the next 3 stations. But tell them." She paused, remembering the subway footage, the clinical precision with which the woman had dismantled 5 trained operatives. "Tell them to proceed with extreme caution. What they are hunting is not just a person. It is Winterbloom." At her junior agent's confused expression, she added, "Pray you never find out what that means." Aboard the westbound train, the woman who had once been Riven Parish, and before that, something else entirely, gazed out the window as the landscape of rural Pennsylvania rolled past. For the first time since the subway, she allowed herself to remember. The classified program, the specialized training, the missions no one could know about, the betrayal that had forced the surviving team members deep underground. For 5 years, she had lived as a ghost, constructing a life of careful anonymity. Now, in saving those passengers, she had sacrificed that safety. She was the last one left. And they were coming. Her reflection in the window showed no fear, only resolution. She had made her choice on that subway car. Now she would face what came next. As the train rushed westward, carrying her toward an uncertain future, the woman no one had noticed until she chose to be seen, allowed herself a small, determined smile. Winterbloom was not finished after all. What did they call it? The voice came from a seat across the aisle, startling her from her thoughts. She turned to see an elderly man with kind eyes watching her. He nodded toward the small television mounted in the train car, which was still playing coverage of the subway incident. "Pardon me?" she asked, her voice measured, neutral. "The news," he clarified. "They are calling that woman something. The Quiet Defender, I think. Fitting name, would not you say?" She offered a polite smile. "I suppose so. Makes you wonder, does not it?" The old man continued. "How many people like that are out there? Ordinary folks with extraordinary abilities, living among us." "I am not sure such people exist," she replied carefully. The old man chuckled. "Oh, they do. My son was Special Forces. Never talked about his work, but I could see it in his eyes sometimes. The things he had done, the things he could do if needed." He studied her face. "Eyes like yours, actually." Her posture shifted imperceptibly. "I should get some rest before my stop," she said, opening a book she had no intention of reading. Of course," the man nodded, seemingly unperturbed. "Just one thing before I leave you be." She waited, every sense alert despite her relaxed appearance. "Whoever she is, that woman on the subway, I hope she knows that some of us understand. Sometimes the most important fights are the ones nobody sees." For a moment, something genuine crossed her face, a flash of vulnerability quickly concealed. "I am sure she just wants to be left alone," she said quietly. The old man nodded. "That is what my son always wanted too. Never could manage it, though. People like that, they do not get to choose when they are needed." He settled back in his seat, closing his eyes. "Just as well I am too old to be of any use anymore." She returned to her book, but her mind was elsewhere, processing this exchange. Was it coincidence? A test? Simple human connection? In the 5 years since Winterbloom had been betrayed and scattered, she had taught herself to trust nothing. Yet something about the old man's words rang true. People like her did not get to choose when they were needed. She had proven that on the subway. The train announcement system chimed. "Next stop, Harrisburg." Harrisburg. Next stop. She gathered her belongings. This would not be her final destination, just another point in a journey that had no clear end. As she stood, the old man appeared to be sleeping. She paused beside his seat. "Your son was lucky to have someone who understood," she said softly, then moved toward the exit. As the train slowed, her phone vibrated with an incoming message. A new number, but a signature encryption pattern she recognized immediately. Not all betrayed. Some survived underground. Rendezvous point Theta active. 24 hours. She deleted the message, her mind already calculating. Theta was St. Louis, doable within the time frame if she changed her route immediately. But could she trust it? After Berlin, Santiago, Dubai, Toronto, her former teammates eliminated one by one. Trust was a luxury she could ill afford, yet standing still meant certain discovery. Agent Thorne was good, perhaps the best tracker the agency had. The net would only tighten. As she stepped onto the Harrisburg platform, she made her decision. She would proceed to Theta, but on her terms, with every precaution. If Winterbloom truly had survivors, they were her only hope of understanding why, after 5 years of silence, they had all become targets again. Harrisburg Station hummed with midday activity as Riven slipped through the crowd. She purchased a ticket to Chicago with cash, making sure the transaction would be logged in the system, then walked to the restroom where she quickly changed her appearance again. The auburn wig came off, replaced by a short blonde one. Contacts shifted her eye color from brown to green. She emerged looking like a different woman entirely. On the platform, she deliberately looked up at a security camera, giving it a clear view of her new appearance before boarding a different train than the one she had purchased a ticket for, this one bound for Cleveland. She would make her way to St. Louis from there. If Thorne was as good as her reputation suggested, she would track the ticket purchase to Chicago. It would buy Riven valuable time. 20 minutes into the journey to Cleveland, Riven closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to plan. Rendezvous Point Theta was an abandoned clock factory on the outskirts of St. Louis. The Winterbloom team had established a network of such locations years ago, each stocked with supplies, weapons, and secure communications equipment. 5 years ago, when everything went wrong, they had scattered. Protocol dictated no contact, new identities, new lives. The fact that someone had activated Theta meant either a legitimate emergency gathering of survivors or a trap. She opened her eyes when the train lurched slightly. A family had boarded at a small station, the parents struggling with luggage while their 2 children ran ahead excitedly. The normalcy of the scene struck her with unexpected force. These were the people she had protected all her career, first officially, then from the shadows. People living ordinary lives, untouched by the darker realities she navigated. The memory of the subway resurfaced. She could have remained hidden, preserved her cover, but when the terrorist had pointed the gun at that father, his child screaming, something fundamental had shifted in her calculation. The risk to her security had suddenly weighed less than the certainty of what would happen if she did nothing. Her training had emphasized the mission above all else. Emotions were variables to be controlled, not indulged. Yet in that moment on the subway, her decision had not been purely tactical. She wondered if the others had experienced similar moments before they were found and eliminated. The train announcement system chimed. Next stop, Pittsburgh. 15 minutes to Pittsburgh. She would need to switch trains there. As the train slowed, she took out her phone and accessed a secure messaging platform through a series of proxies. Time to see if anyone would answer. Verify Theta, she typed, adding a recognition code that only a Winterbloom operative would understand. Within 30 seconds, a response appeared. Verified. Countdown active. Who calls? She hesitated. Using her code name would create a digital footprint, however temporary. But if this was legitimate, protocol required proper identification. Hemlock, she typed finally, her designation in a program that officially never existed. The response came immediately. Welcome back, Hemlock. 2 others confirmed. Await instructions at Theta. 2 others. Out of an original team of 7, only 3 remained, assuming this was legitimate. Vega, Archer, Carell, and Mercer were confirmed dead. That left Fern and Wolf as the potential survivors besides herself. As the train pulled into Pittsburgh, Riven made her decision. She would proceed to St. Louis, but not directly to Theta. She would establish surveillance first, confirm independently that friendlies were present. Trust, but verify, as their handler used to say before he too betrayed them. She stepped off the train with her small bag, another anonymous traveler in a sea of faces, and disappeared into the Pittsburgh afternoon. In a secure conference room in the FBI field office in New York, Agent Alara Thorne stood before a wall of digital displays. One showed the Harrisburg Station security footage. Another tracked known transportation routes from Pennsylvania westward. A third displayed dossiers marked classified, Omega clearance only. "We lost her in Harrisburg," a young analyst reported. "Facial recognition picked her up entering the station, but the system flagged at least 3 potential matches leaving, all with different appearances." "She purchased a ticket to Chicago," another agent added. "Which means she is going anywhere but Chicago," Thorne responded. "Pull security footage from all trains departing Harrisburg within 2 hours of her arrival. Focus on Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and westbound routes." She turned to the classified dossiers on the screen. Most were heavily redacted, but she had enough clearance to access the essential details. Project Winterbloom, initiated 15 years ago. Elite operators trained for deep cover counterterrorism operations, officially disbanded 5 years ago after a mission gone wrong. Her secure phone buzzed with an incoming message from her superior. "Washington wants updates hourly. Joint Chiefs are involved now." Thorne frowned. This level of attention from the Pentagon suggested something bigger than a single rogue operative. The subway incident had triggered alarms at the highest levels. "Sir," she called to the senior intelligence officer observing from the corner. "What am I missing? Why is an obsolete program from 5 years ago generating this much heat?" The gray-haired man approached the displays, studying the fragmentary information. "Because Winterbloom was never about counterterrorism, Agent Thorne. That was the cover story." "Then what was it about?" "That is still classified above your level." He pointed to a pattern of redactions across the files. "But I can tell you this. Winterbloom was targeted for elimination 5 years ago because they discovered something they were never meant to find. The 4 confirmed kills in the past month suggest someone is tying up loose ends." "And the subway attack?" "Likely an attempt to flush out Hemlock, our mystery woman, using civilian hostages as bait." Thorne processed this information, rebuilding her mental model of the case. "You are saying the subway attack was never about terrorism. It was about drawing her out." "Precisely. Lazarus and his team were mercenaries, hired to create a situation she could not ignore." He tapped on Lazarus's file. "His dishonorable discharge was administrative cover. He has been working Black Ops contracts ever since." "So who hired him to target her?" The intelligence officer's expression darkened. "That is the question that has the Joint Chiefs losing sleep." Back in the Harrisburg station restroom, a cleaning attendant found a discarded auburn wig in the trash. She added it to her cart without a second thought, not realizing its significance as she wheeled her supplies down the corridor, passing directly beneath a security camera. 12 hours later, in a dimly lit motel room outside St. Louis, Riven Parish, now sporting short blonde hair and green eyes, used a burner laptop to access the security feed she had hacked overlooking the clock factory. For 6 hours, she had observed the building, noting any signs of movement or surveillance. At 2:17 a.m., a figure appeared at the east entrance. Even through the grainy footage, she recognized the distinctive gait. Wolf. His appearance had changed, but the way he moved was imprinted in her memory from countless operations. 30 minutes later, a second figure arrived. This one moved with a slight limp that had not been there before. Fern. She watched as they entered using the recognition protocols they had established years ago. No signs of coercion, no indication of surveillance. They appeared to be alone and acting of their own volition, but that did not make sense. Winterbloom had been betrayed from within. Their handler Regent had sold them out. The mission in Odessa that went catastrophically wrong had been compromised before they even arrived. Half the team died that night. The survivors had scattered, following deep cover protocols. Now someone was hunting them systematically. Berlin, Santiago, Dubai, Toronto. 4 of her teammates eliminated in the past month, each death made to look like an accident or random violence. And then the subway incident, designed specifically to expose her. If Fern and Wolf were alive and at Theta, either they had managed to evade the hunters, or they were bait in a trap. Or perhaps they were the hunters themselves. She closed the laptop and leaned back, weighing her options. Go to Theta and risk walking into an ambush, or disappear again, knowing that 2 people who might have answers would be left behind, whether they were allies or enemies. The subway moment replayed in her mind, the decision point, the choice to act rather than remain hidden. Riven checked her watch, 3:42 a.m. The rendezvous window closed at dawn. She had just over 2 hours to decide. In her years with Winterbloom, she had been the strategist, the one who calculated risks and outcomes with computer-like precision. Fern was the infiltrator, able to assume any identity. Wolf was the weapon, lethal in any environment. Together, they had been unstoppable. Until Odessa. Until the betrayal. She opened her bag and removed a false bottom, revealing a compact handgun and 2 spare magazines. If she was walking into a trap, she would not go unprepared. Dawn approached as Riven made her final preparations. She had decided. The only way to end this, to stop running, was to confront it directly. If Fern and Wolf were there for legitimate reasons, together they might stand a chance against whoever was hunting them. If they were compromised, she would deal with that too. She left the motel room exactly as she had found it, leaving no trace of her presence. The night manager never noticed her departure, his attention focused on a late-night talk show. The abandoned clock factory loomed against the pre-dawn sky, its broken windows like empty eye sockets in a concrete skull. Riven approached from the west, using the adjacent rail yard for cover. Her movements were silent, methodical. She avoided the main entrance, instead accessing a maintenance tunnel they had designated as a secondary entry point years ago. The tunnel was undisturbed, no signs of recent passage. She moved through the darkness with practiced ease, counting steps, remembering the layout from the original Theta setup. At the inner door, she paused. The recognition sequence required 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. She performed the sequence, then stepped to the side, weapon ready. The door opened slowly. A shaft of dim light spilled into the tunnel. Hemlock? A familiar voice, though roughened by time. Verify, she responded, not moving from her position. Winterbloom Protocol 739, Hemlock confirm. She recognized the challenge phrase. Protocol acknowledged. Response code 512. The door opened wider. Wolf stood there, a shadow of the man she had known. Still powerful but older, his face weathered, hair gone gray at the temples. His eyes were the same though, alert and intelligent. 5 years, he said simply. You look well. Necessary precautions, she replied, still not lowering her weapon. Fern? Inside. Not as lucky as you. Odessa left marks. She followed him through the door into what had once been the factory floor, now converted into a makeshift operations center. Computer equipment hummed quietly. Maps covered one wall, and seated at a table, her right leg supported by a brace, was Fern. The ghost returns, Fern said, a tired smile crossing her face. Took you long enough. Riven kept her weapon at her side. 4 down in a month. Then the subway. Someone is closing the circle. Wolf nodded. We know. That is why we activated Theta. Time to stop running and start hunting. Who? Riven asked. Regent? Fern shook her head. Regent was just a middleman. We found something bigger. She pushed a folder across the table. What we found in Odessa was just the beginning. The reason they tried to kill us then, the reason they are hunting us now, is all in there. Riven looked at the folder but did not touch it. How do I know this is not a trap? That you have not been compromised? You do not, Wolf said frankly. But ask yourself this. If we wanted you dead, would we go through such an elaborate setup? After Berlin, Santiago, Dubai, and Toronto, the pattern is clear. They do not need tricks. They are picking us off systematically. And yet here you both are, alive, Riven observed. Not without cost, Fern tapped her braced leg. And not without being careful. The same way you have been. The quiet woman nobody notices until she chooses to be seen. Riven finally holstered her weapon and approached the table. What did we find in Odessa that was worth killing for? Fern opened the folder, revealing photographs, documents, and data drives. Evidence that Project Winterbloom was never what we were told. We were not counterterrorism operatives, Hemlock. We were unwitting test subjects in something much darker. Operation Chimera, Wolf added. Human enhancement, cognitive modification. They did something to us, to all of us. Odessa was where we found the proof. Riven stared at the documents, pieces falling into place. The specialized training that had seemed too effective, too seamless. The physical capabilities beyond normal parameters. The way her mind processed information, calculated odds, anticipated moves. If this is true, she said slowly, then what happened on the subway was not coincidence. They wanted to see if the enhancements had persisted over time. Exactly, Fern confirmed. They needed to know if you still had the abilities, even after years without reinforcement. It was a field test, with live subjects. And I passed, Riven said grimly. With flying colors, Wolf agreed, which means they will never stop hunting you now. U.S. Any of us who survived. Riven finally sat down, accepting the reality of her situation. So what is our play? Fern smiled, a hint of her old determination showing through. We do what Winterbloom was designed to do. We hunt the real terrorists, the ones in laboratories and boardrooms who turned us into weapons without our knowledge or consent. The three of us against an entire black program with government backing? Riven asked, the strategist in her already calculating the odds. 4, actually, came a new voice from the shadows behind them. All three turned, weapons appearing instantly in their hands. A figure stepped forward, hands raised non-threateningly. Mercer? Wolf exclaimed. Toronto was confirmed. You were dead. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, Mercer replied with a grim smile. Though not without cost. He touched a scar running along his jawline. They are getting better at finding us. But we are getting better at disappearing. And reappearing, Riven added, holstering her weapon once more. Like on a subway train when civilians are threatened. Mercer nodded. They know our psychological profiles. They know what triggers would force us into action. For you, it was innocent lives at risk. For Carell, it was children in danger. For Vega, a terror threat near his family. They used our humanity against us, Fern said quietly. Then we used their inhumanity against them, Wolf suggested. The people who did this, who authorized Chimera, who turned us into lab rats, they have a weakness we do not. What is that? Riven asked. They think we are just weapons, Wolf replied, but we are more than what they made us to be. We are still human, and that makes us unpredictable. Riven felt something she had not experienced in 5 years. Purpose. Not just survival, but a mission. The strategist in her was already formulating plans, calculating odds, identifying weaknesses to exploit. They will expect us to run again, she said, to scatter and hide. So we do the opposite, Mercer suggested. We go on the offensive. Together, Fern added. Riven looked at her 3 teammates, the only people in the world who truly understood what she was, what had been done to her, what she was capable of. Together, she agreed. Winterbloom reactivated. As dawn broke over St. Louis, 4 shadows moved through the abandoned factory, preparing for a war none of them had chosen, but all were determined to finish. The quiet woman from the subway was quiet no more. She had found her voice, her purpose, her people. And somewhere in Washington, alarms were about to sound.